In a season where nothing goes right for Mercedes, the team is awfully optimistic going forward, as Toto Wolff's statements make it seem like Mercedes is on Ferrari's spot and not 44 points behind P3 in the Constructors Standings. I guess that you must keep your head high at all times, and while this is a good mentality to have, makes us wonder how can the Silver Arrows be so optimistic about the upcoming Miami GP and the upgrades they will bring to the W15. Do they know something we don't? After a promising sprint race result with second-place finish for Lewis Hamilton, the German manufacturer had another tough weekend in China. Unfortunately, the Grand Prix did not live up to expectations, as Russell finished 6th and Hamilton 9th, and despite making substantial setup adjustments for both drivers during Saturday's sprint, there was no visible increase in potential, leaving the team once again to wonder why they aren't able to fully use the promise they think exists in their W15 car. So the team has come clean about the fact that certain questions remain. In the past 2.5 years, there have been several occasions where Hamilton, or occasionally George Russell, has attributed unpredictable performance fluctuations to variations in setup experiments, either at the team's request or, as in the case of Hamilton, at the driver's own initiative. Most of the time it's been Hamilton. At first, they blamed him for assisting the crew in searching the setup windows of their problematic cars, and even Hamilton has confessed to getting himself into some trouble this year. Hamilton qualified second in the sprint last weekend in Shanghai, but qualified 18th for the main race due to a personal mistake, and he had a difficult go of it throughout the Grand Prix, but managed to get into the points in the penultimate lap thanks to a safety car. After 5 races into the season, the revamped W15 by Mercedes has fallen short of delivering the expected performances, triggering extensive discussions about the team's correlation issues, and despite generating more downforce compared to the W15's predecessors, this improvement hasn't translated into better lap times, which is the main mystery for the Silver Arrows this season. Consequently, they have conducted experiments in setup, notably before the qualifying session for the Chinese Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton revealed that he took a long way in one direction, while George Russell opted for the opposite. For Hamilton, it turned out to be the wrong decision. After the sprint, he had already indicated he had driven some sizable setup changes, then post-race admitted he paid the price and planned to make sure I don't do that in the future. Senior Mercedes figures Toto Wolff and Andrew Chauvelin backed the sentiment that extensive changes had been made, and not for the better. Wolff called it a difficult car to drive and set up, and that Hamilton's car in particular was far away from the optimal. In Mercedes' official press release, he was surprisingly blunt about it from a team perspective, rather than piling into Hamilton specifically. "We must make sure that we are not trying to find a silver bullet each weekend when it comes to how we run the car," said Wolff. "We made too many extreme changes after the sprint, and that made the most important part of the weekend much more challenging. On balance, this weekend was about what can be expected from Mercedes, in that between the two cars they probably achieved about as much as possible. Hamilton massively overperformed in sprint qualifying, took great advantage of the wet, and showed anyone who doubts whether he's got the ability or the interest that he certainly does. And when that car has track position, it can run competitively somewhere in that group of cars with Ferrari, McLaren and Aston Martin. Hamilton was at the very upper end of what that car can achieve on Saturday, but in qualifying and Sunday's race, Russell was the one who got the most out of the car. And that, if starting from behind, equates to no more than sniping to beat the aforementioned rivals if any of them underachieve. So this was not a bad reaction from team or driver to one misstep. It addressed a trend in the early races of perhaps overreaching at times. Mercedes is 4th best at best, and that has led to chasing too much on setup and then playing catch-up through the rest of the weekend, or locking in changes for vital sessions that cannot be undone and then have to be lived with. The lesson is essentially to accept this car for what it is for now and do the best with it until it can be made better. Clearly, Mercedes must add performance, as the car is just not quick enough. Russell reckoned that in itself is part of the fundamentals Mercedes must do better, as there is no silver bullet, but they only need to keep adding performance and focus on the basics in the wind tunnel. But this is easier said than done, and until then the team needs to deal with with it a bit better. Hamilton, meanwhile, may need to rein in a bit of his natural enthusiasm on track, and specifically when it comes to chasing the setup off it as well. Hamilton understands what he wants the car to achieve, and he knows his past techniques like braking deeply into corners and somehow making it work. However, achieving that is simply not possible with this generation of car, especially not with this generation of Mercedes, and when he does have a better base and a cleaner weekend, he's highly effective. We saw this for most of the weekend at Suzuka and during the sprint in China. It's evident that the high performance we have come to associate with him is still achievable. Wolff explained the reasons for the huge swing in performance in China. "I think the car is a difficult car to set up and difficult to drive, and that is why you have these oscillations in performances, in my opinion," he told the media. "I think where the car is, where Lewis's car was in the race, was certainly far away from the optimum, and it is driving on a knife edge. So what is it? This is where we are. For Miami, we are bringing some new bits, and it will be interesting to see how they are going to perform there." Mercedes are fourth in the Constructors Championship on 52 points and without a Grand Prix podium. But while their gap to Red Bull is a considerable 143 points, it's their deficit to Ferrari and McLaren that's creating headlines. Given last year Mercedes beat both teams in the championship, and this season they're 99 behind Ferrari and 44 adrift of engine customer McLaren. Wolff says it's not that this year's car is more difficult than its predecessor, it's that Ferrari and McLaren have taken strides forward. "I think the cars were difficult all along these last 2 years," he said. "The advantage that we had is that McLaren was not racing us, let's say, the first half of the season, so they weren't that competitive. The Ferrari wasn't as quick and dropped the ball on several occasions, and that's why we were regular podium contenders and closest to Red Bull. Now that these teams picked up the performance levels, this is a relative game. And suddenly what was good enough for third last year is just good enough for sixth, and that's why it's tough. The car is as difficult as it has been in the past, tricky for the drivers." George yesterday, when we discussed it, said it was the most tricky qualifying car that he's had so far. So overall, in a way, same symptoms, same. A significant factor complicating matters is the misconception both from the media and within the team that the car possesses inherent potential that has yet to be realized. If they've exhausted every experiment under the sun for 3 years and it still remains challenging and inconsistent, perhaps the car is simply fundamentally not very good. It becomes increasingly difficult to take any statement from Toto, Lewis or George seriously, as they seem so inconsistent and contradictory. For instance, at the beginning of the preseason testing, there was much talk about how well it handled, yet now they're claiming to have never experienced such a tricky qualifying session. If we accept the experiment's excuse at face value, it seems to me that Mercedes is still living in the distant past when they were fighting for the championship. They need to acknowledge that their car is currently midfield, and they must maximize the points each weekend to even hope to challenge for P3 in the championship. It's disheartening that after 3 years of these results, Mercedes still believes they are in a fight for the top. Furthermore, it's unfair to the people in the factory and the team who are doing their best to deliver the best possible car. While the current car is not great, it can still be pretty decent with the team and drivers working on small improvements. Every time the car is on the track, they need to try to learn more about it. Each small improvement will lead to more understanding and further improvements, and eventually the moment will come when Mercedes can challenge whoever is in front of them again. This is how every team has to approach it if they want to challenge the fastest team. You can't just become the fastest because you want to. It takes hard work. It's not about experimental setups or taking huge risks. It's about taking small, steady steps on the path to understanding the car. Do you think Mercedes can bounce back in Miami with the new upgrades? Let us know down in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.